In this video, we'll look at real option pricing using the discounted cash flow method. We'll examine net present value, internal rate of return, modified internal rate of return, the profitability index, payback method, and the discounted payback method. If you don't have your workbook set up like this, and I start, notice here in column B, I leave column A open. There's a reason for that. Go ahead and pause the video and set your worksheet up like this. All right, to begin the exercise, we have a few things that we are given. We're given the cost of capital. We'll just put that at 10% annually, and the annual reinvestment rate, which we will use later, also 10%. We're going to set up a 4-year model. We have time 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and cash flow, we will see that $1,000 minus as it flows out, and we'll set each of these equal to $1,000. I'll set that to absolute. That way, when we change that amount, our entire model will reflect the change. We'll only have to change it in one place. Some additional values that we need to put in, where we anticipate that in the first year we'll get $500. In the second year we'll get $400. In the third year we have $300. And in the fourth year, $100. We'll go ahead and do the calculation for cumulative cash flow, which is just a little addition calculation where we take the current year's income and we add that to the previous year's activity. In this case, it was an outflow of cash. In future years, it might be income. And we'll just copy this across. Check it to make sure the current year's plus the previous year's income. Now with those values in place, we can go ahead and calculate the net present value. Net present value doesn't use the discounted cash flows, it just uses the anticipated cash flows. Calculating net present value in Excel requires that you do a couple things quickly. First of all, in your experience with a calculator, you may have included the amount invested in the net present value calculation. In Excel, you don't do that. In Excel, you enter net present value, which is the formula, and it asks you for the rate. And the rate in this case is the cost of capital, R. Then it asks you for the value, the cash flow values, which will start here in year 1. Those are the cash flow values. Now once we've calculated that, then we add to that year 0. That's how you use the net present value function in Excel. 7882 is correct. Next is internal rate of return. Excel has that formula, IRR. And we get the cash flows. In this case, we do select year 0. Just go ahead and select them all. And the internal rate of return here is 14.49%. We'll do the modified internal rate of return. Again, we select the values, which we have C6 to G6. And then it wants to know the finance rate, which is 10%, and the anticipated reinvestment rate, which is, in our model, 10%. with those values and move forward. We get 12.11%. That is correct. The profitability index is the present value of the future cash flows over the initial investment. We need to make the initial investment positive in this case. Up here it's a negative cash flow. To calculate this, we take net present value. It wants the rate. There's the rate. The future cash flows. So we're not going to add the initial investment. However, we are going to place this over the inverse of the initial investment to make it positive. And that gives us the profitability index of $1.08. Now to calculate the payback using undiscounted cash flows, so the undiscounted payback time, I'm going to solve this in two parts. First, I'm going to solve for the last year, and then I'll add that to these values. We're going to use the lookup function. What I'm going to do, I'll solve for the last year right here, and I'll put that value in there. To do that, I want to look up 0. I want to look for 0 in my cumulative cash flows. I'm going to start with the initial investment, click, and select that entire row. I'll look up that value, 0, and when I find it, I want to go up here and get the year in which that value occurs. So let's talk about this just a bit. Lookup is going to look for 0. Now lookup always looks for an approximate match. So it's going to start down row 7, starting at column C, and you'll notice that these values are sorted from low to high. It's going to see if negative 1,000 is equal to or greater than 0. It says no, so it goes to the next one. Is negative 500 equal to or greater than 0? No. Is negative 100 equal to or greater than 0? No. Is 200 equal to or greater than 0? Yes, it is. So it's going to go back. Then it's going to go up here and get year 2. Now I want to add to that the cash flow portion from year 3 that's needed to reach break even. So what I'll do here is I'll go ahead and just follow this formula. I'll add, and I'm going to take the absolute value. Talk about that in a bit. I want to look up, I'm going to look up this too, this value that I found. I want to go to this year because I want to go and get this value right here. Because I want to know how much money I need to bring in before I can break even. So in year 2, I'm still $100 in the red. So I want to go get that so that I know that I'm $100 in the red in year 2. So I'm going to look up. When I find 2, I'll go down here and I'll find 2, you see, in the 1, 2, 3rd position. So I'll go down here and get 1, 2, 3, and I'll get my negative 100. Get that, that'll be an absolute value. Make that positive. I'll place that over the cash flow of the first year at which I'm in the black. So I'll look up. And the first year I'm in the black is just the last year I'm in the red, plus 1. I'll look up that value, and I'll look for that in the time row or in the years. When I find that, I'm going to go get the cash flow. Notice from the formula it's CF, because I want to put 100 over 300 because it's going to take me 33% of the year, or 1/3 of the year, before I reach zero. The remaining 2/3, I'll get $200 in year 3. So I put that in, plus enter, and you can see that the payback period here is 2.33 years. Now, before we can do the discounted payback method, we need to calculate the discounted cash flows. In order to do that, we have the formula here for discounted cash flows. That's the cash flow for the period over 1 plus the rate raised to the period. So we'll go ahead and calculate that. Equals the cash flow for the period, move that relative, over 1 plus the cost of capital, or the rate, we'll make that absolute, and we'll raise that value to time, or the period that we're in this case period 1. Press enter, 455, we just copy that across, we put it in correctly, and we get our discounted cash flows. And we'll put in our cumulative discounted cash flow formula, which is just the cash flow for the period plus the previous period's activity, and we copy that across, and we have our discounted cash flows and our cumulative discounted cash flows to use in calculating the discounted payback method. You can see from the formula that the discounted payback is similar to the payback, just uses different cash flows. So we need to go back and calculate. We could use this, but we'll go ahead and calculate this. In this case, they both finish in year 2, but in other instances, they may finish in different years. So we'll do equals lookup. We're going to look up 0, again, to find the last year in which we have negative cash flows. We're going to look for that value, this time, in our discounted cash flow row. And when we find it, we're going to go up and get the corresponding year. That gives us year 2. Now we'll complete the equation here to find the discounted payback. We'll take equals the year plus, again, we want the absolute value of that last negative amount. So we'll look up, we'll just look up the year. We know when it occurs in C5. When we find that, we'll go ahead and get the discounted cash flow. So now we have the absolute value of that final negative cash flow, and we'll place that over lookup. We'll take the final year of a negative cash flow, add 1, which will give us the first year of a positive cash flow. We'll look for that in the year row, and then we'll go and get the actual cash flow for that year to find out how far into the year we need to go before we break even. We can see that the discounted payback period is 2.95 years in this case. That's how you use Excel to solve for real options using the various discounted cash flow methods.